Welcome to the Campfire Podcast.
All right, Ryan McCook,
Take us away.
Isaiah Estrada, welcome to the Campfire Podcast. Good to have you guys back. Today we do have a special episode inspired partially by revived thoughts and matters and missionaries. So we'll let Reilly do the introduction and then we'll get into the whole topic.
Yeah, so today's episode, we're going to be looking at the life of George Müller. And how we thought about doing this topic is we all like listening to podcasts about influential people, Christians or missionaries or whoever they were, and just listening about their life and their stories and what they did and how God used them and how God provided for them and led them. I think it's awesome to look back in the past and see what God has done, and then also taking those things into your own life and looking at people as an example and seeing what God can do in your own life. So with George Müller, there's definitely a lot of cool stories and things to talk about, and I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate to his story. So to start out, I'm just going to give an overview of his life, and then we're going to jump into some more specific things, some more specific stories. So George Müller, he was born in 1805 in Prussia. And I had to look up where the heck is Prussia because it doesn't exist anymore. But that just means he grew up in modern day Germany and he spoke German. And he had a mom and a dad, and he was the oldest son. But as George grew older, he wasn't a very good kid. He was mischievous. He would steal. He didn't really care about his family or others. He was really only looking out for himself. And I think a story that describes that is when George was 14, his mom was sick and she had a disease and she was going to die. And his dad was trying to get George to come in to be with his mom, to be with the family. And George was just partying and gambling and drinking at the age of 14. He didn't care. He came back and his mom was dead. So obviously it's kind of a rough guy. His heart seemed pretty hard. And he carried that attitude in his early life as he was a young adult. And his dad would support him to go to school and go to colleges and to become a Lutheran pastor. But even as George was going to these schools, he was a really smart guy, and he knew 6 different languages. He always did well in his studies, but he would also spend time telling stories at pubs and gambling and cheating people. So from when he was young to when he was a young adult, he hadn't really changed that much until one of his friends invited him to a Bible study. And his friend, who was kind of like a more religious guy, but then he was also hanging around George. So he's like, okay, I'm going to kind of let these things go and I'm going to party with George. And then he went back to going to Bible studies and things like that. So he's like, hey, he told him about the Bible study, and George is like, okay, I'll go. And in George's mind, he was thinking, you know what? I'm going to go to this Bible study. I'm going to come up with a story at this Bible study with whatever happens, and I'm going to tell that at the ale house, and it's going to be great. People are going to love this story. So his attitude was really to go in, get some info, and make fun of these people. But he went to this Bible study, and they just did simple things. They prayed, they sang, they read the Bible, they read a sermon, and his heart was changed. And so from that... yeah, go ahead.
Can I give a comment on that? I was listening to this sermon by, it was like George was giving just like he was teaching a church here in America, and it sounds like my friend, he was a Christian, but he hang out around me because he wanted to do the bad stuff.
Yeah.
He said my friend is a Christian, but he's like, he would hang around me because he wanted to do the bad stuff. And then a year later, his friend was like, I don't really want to go to these things with you anymore. And then George was like, why not? Where are you going? You go out every day.
He was hiding it. He's kind of embarrassed.
Yeah. And then his friend is like, well, I don't know if you would like it. And then he's like, what? And then he's like, I'm going to go and argue with anyone because he said he was a good debater. So he said, I'm going to go and argue with everybody and just come out on top. And then he's like, and then he said, I argued myself into heaven, which was just like.
He was scheming, but God was
That'd be a good
scheming-er, more scheming-er him.
Yeah, he was better, but God was better. Like God was gooder. Yeah, and the thing
God
from that was
gooder.
like, God was good, and he said, like, the thing that changed him was like this was like more personal. The people, his friends, and this like Bible study guys would talk about God in a personable way instead of just like how everybody talks about it. Is like these guys talk to Christ like he was their friend, and they were on their knees praying, and that was like the part where. Said 2 weeks he went there to be like, I'm going to go argue with everybody. And then he came back. And then 2 weeks later, I was like, oh, this is changing my life.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah. So from that, his life was changed. And God was opening up doors for him to go to school. And then he also gave George a desire to be a missionary. And there were some different paths that George thought he was going to walk down that eventually didn't work out. But from the people at the school and professors or pastors, people he knew, he ended up having a connection to go to England, to go to London. So he ended up going there. He was going to go there and go to a school about like learning Hebrew and learning how to minister to the Jewish people in Europe. His plan was to go there, stay some months and study, and then go back to Europe as a missionary. But instead...
I mean, he went from...
from
Prussia to...
Yeah, from Prussia to go to England.
And then back to Prussia.
Yeah, or maybe not back to Prussia, but other parts of Europe.
Okay.
He was going to go and be a missionary there. And then God put on his heart to stay in England because there was a lot of needy people there. There was, I think it was cholera, like a disease going around where people would die and the church bells would ring and they would be ringing all day because they would ring whenever someone would die. So he saw a need there. The parents were dying. The kids were alone. They needed someone to be there. He started breakfast things, which led to Sunday schools, which led to orphanages. And throughout all of these things that George did, he had seen an example from other Christians in his early Christian life, like around that time he went to the Bible study, about guys that were doing things, but they didn't ask people for money. They simply prayed and God would provide, which was really counter that culture there because the churches there, they would rent their pews. So the rich people, they get to sit up front, and the poor people who can't pay as much, they have to sit in the back. And George is like,
and this
is wrong.
The funny thing from the sermon is giving is like in America, you guys should start like charging people to sit in the back. Everybody in the front gets free seats. If you sit in the back, you get to sit.
I know. I thought about like at church, like they're like, all right, everybody fill in up in the front. And I guess it was opposite back then.
Yeah.
I thought of that too.
And just like you said, I think the thing with that is said, from what I read, and like I was listening to his biography, and it was talking about like he didn't want to go because the church told him to go. He said, I want to go where God sends me. I don't want to just go because the church said go here. So the church wanted him, I think, to go to Austria, and it was like, I want to go where God is sending me to go, instead of just like, oh, the church wants me to go here. And the reason why his dad sent him to school too was because he was going to be a pastor, and the church that, I don't remember the exact church he was going to work for, but it was like a state-owned church, so it's going to make a lot of money. So his dad was like paying for his own insurance. Like, if I get old and I can't work, then George, you just take care of me.
Yeah. So eventually George, God kind of starts building something bigger and reaching more people as he goes, but he's still keeping the same attitude of he's just going to go where God leads him. He doesn't want to be bound by people's opinions or bound by their money or bound by what they're telling him to do. It's just between him and God, and God will provide. And throughout his life, I looked it up. He, like the money that was in his hands, if you take it to today, it was around 150 to 200 million that passed through his hands in his lifetime, and he took care of over like 10,000 orphans or things like that. And he didn't live at the orphanage. I think he lived like apart from the orphanage as he got older, but then eventually he came back, and as he got older, he lived in the orphanage and with the people there, and he kind of spent his last few years there, like at the orphanage once, because his wife ended up dying and his daughter ended up dying and things like that. But
and he did get married and then started traveling to tell, because his second wife wanted him to tell the stories of like what God had done in his life. So he started traveling with that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Was his main location was Europe? That's where he did most of his ministry?
Later on in his life, he went all over. He went to Europe, he went to Australia, he went to New Zealand, he went to Canada, he went to North America, he went to D.L. Moody's place in Chicago, he went to California, he met the president at the White House and things like that. He went to India, China, he went all over as he got older. But I think the main point in the story of George Müller is God took someone who was selfish, who didn't care, who wanted money. He completely changed his heart, gave him a heart to serve God and to walk through life with open hands. Like, God is going to give me things, and I'm just going to give it away because it's not God's money. I'm sorry, scratch that. It's not George's money. It's heresy. It's God's money. And
the boy gets one credit card, and now it's, wow.
It ain't God's money.
And George Müller, at the end of his, kind of towards the end of his life, he would say, like, when I pass away, you guys are going to see that I was dependent on God and not God was dependent on me. So he wanted to make that clear. All these miracles, things happening, people giving, that was God doing it. So I think this was just, he was a normal guy who was used mightily by God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I kind of did a long overview, but
that's what we asked you to do. So good job staying on task.
His main, I guess you could say, like, purpose was orphans. Is that what he?
Yeah.
No.
That was his.
He said his main purpose was to show that God is faithful.
I know, but his main area that he served in was with the orphans.
Yeah, but he wasn't just like the orphanage guy. He also did a lot of other things too. But I think he's best known as the orphanage guy, or the guy who never asked for money.
The guy who never asked for money. But I think, like, the thing I liked about it is when he said, like, my number one priority wasn't to, like, I want to be the guy that takes care of the orphan. Like, I want people to see that God is a faithful God, that he can take care of you and you don't have to, like, rely on anything else than him. Like, he's a faithful God. And I want to, like, show his glory. Like, I want people to look at what God is allowing me to do to show that he's this, like, omniscient, all-powerful, all-knowing, giving God that gives and takes care of his people. Yeah. That's what I read, and that was kind of like cool. It was like to see, like, oh, the guy wasn't just like, I'm gonna go and do all these things for the orphans. It's like, my number one goal is to show God and to glorify God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think there's a couple stories I wanted to share about when George Müller was young before he got saved, to really see who he was, and then maybe we can go, I don't know, kind of dive in deeper and more specific, just go in order, like early life to adult life to his later in life. But I
just point out something?
Yeah.
Me and George were, like, born 2 days apart. And, like, a lot of years apart, but September 27th, September 25th.
You guys are birthday buds, dude.
Basically twins.
But
basically,
there's a funny story. George was a thief, and his dad knew it. And his dad was a tax collector. And his dad set George up. One day he called George into his office, and he had his coins that were meant to go back to the government that he had collected on the desk. And he said, okay, George, stay here. And he walked out of the room. And that was George's time to shine. He took 3 coins and he put it in his right sock. His dad came in. He was like, it looks like there's less coins in here. And he picked up the coins and counted them. And George was like freaking out inside. And he asked him if he stole it. And I don't think George would admit. And then he's like, okay, empty your pockets. He emptied his pockets. Okay, like take your shirt off. Then like, okay, take your pants off. And George is like, is my dad really going to make me take all my clothes off? And finally he says, take your socks off. And he takes his sock off like in a sly way to where the coins don't jingle. And then his dad makes him hand him the socks or something. And he finds the sock, or he finds the coins in the sock. And what was interesting about what I was listening to about George is his dad made him promise to not steal again. And he's like, okay, I won't steal again. And he got punished. But George wasn't sorry that he stole. He was sorry that he got caught.
Yeah, that's what he said in the sermon. He was saying, I was like, he said, I was a very good liar, so I just kind of got good at not getting caught. I wasn't like, I didn't feel bad for stealing. I just kind of stopped getting caught. I just got good at lying. And then he tells the story of when he went to prison, to jail, and then the guy was in the prison cell with the murderer, and the guy was like, I killed 1 person. Judge was like, I killed 3. Oh. The guy's like, I robbed their bank. The judge is like, I robbed 3. He just like, so he's just like lying his way into like being the most bad boy ever.
Yeah. So George, he did go to jail. He went to jail. I think he went on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve, but he spent 24 days in jail. And the reason why he went to jail is because he would go to these inns, like he would travel around and he would go to these inns and he would stay there and then he would just leave and not pay. And so he was trying... Yeah,
because he was 16, so he was like, what are you going to do to me? I'm 16.
He was young, so he's trying to sneak out, and it said he knocked over...
Like you guys, pool hopping.
And yeah, camping and too late. But he was walking out and he knocked over something, like a flower pot, and it crashed. And he's like, oh, shoot. And then all of a sudden there were these police officers around him, and they took him to the jail. He was there for over 3 weeks, and I guess he was lying about saying he murdered people and things like that when he really just got caught not paying, trying to dash.
And then his dad came and brought him out, and then that's when he sent him to the school.
Yeah. So George and his dad, they never had a good relationship. So when George's dad sent him to that school, he was gonna send him there and make him have a private tutor. So George would be at the school, but then he would always have someone watching over him. And George was thinking, forget that. I don't want to go. Like, it's an awesome place, but I don't want to go there with a tutor. I'm not going to have any fun. So he went to another college, a smaller college. He snuck away there and enrolled there. Came back, waited till the last second to tell his dad, and his dad said, well, you know what? He's 16, he's 17 years old. He's going to do what he wants anyway. So how can I stop him? And George, he goes to that other college, and he becomes known for his stories. We talked about this a little bit. His stories, his drinking, his gambling, being the life of the party. And then he lives that life, but in the midst of that, George has his friend, and George's friend invites him to the Bible study. He goes there. Life has changed. And there's this girl there that the first time he was there, she liked George. She comes up and she's like, oh, hey, what's up? Like, what's your name? Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend? Because she knew the other guy. And George was like, oh, man, she's pretty. She has blue eyes. He liked this girl. She's like, I hope to see you again. And so he was having...
You guys should learn something from George.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy. So he kept going. He kept learning more about God, and he became a Christian. He asked God for forgiveness, and then he wanted to be a missionary. And at one point, he told this girl, like, hey, I want to go and be a missionary and serve God in other countries. And it was funny because I don't think they were dating or anything, but from what she told him, she's like, I don't want to be a missionary wife. And then she kind of felt felt like dumb about saying that, but George knew he liked her and she liked him. And George was like, you would be a great missionary wife. And she's like, I don't want to go and be poor when you can have a good job here. And George realized, okay, this girl, she's not the one for me. So George,
You guys have stories like that or no?
he went through a little mini heartbreak.
Oh,
And so after that, because George's dad, he supported him at the smaller college that George ended up going to. And then George went to the original college his dad wanted him to go to. And so his dad was always supporting him in his study. But now George wanted to go to a missionary training school. And his dad's thinking, hold up, wait a minute. Where's my insurance policy? If you're not going to be a Lutheran pastor, then I'm not.
Yeah, it was Lutheran pastor.
If you're not going to be a Lutheran pastor and you want to go and be a poor missionary, I'm not going to support that for you. So George, he went to his dad and he told his dad, you know what? I want to go to this college and I'm not going to ask for any of your money. I'm not going to be supported by you anymore. And his dad was angry with that. And so kind of their relationship, it got worse after that. So
do you know how old he was when he kind of turned his life around and started his missionary work?
I think around 19. I think it was around 19. And then I think before he went to England, for a couple of years, he was in Prussia, maybe like 2 or 3 years. But George was kind of just like, after that, he was sitting and thinking about what to do. And he kind of questioned in his mind if God really cared about these things going on and cared about providing for him in school. So he said, I'm just going to pray and ask God for money. Ask that God will provide a way for me to go to this missionary school. And after he prayed, one of the teachers or professors came to him with these American guys. And he was asking George to teach them English. And George was thinking in his mind, okay, I want to go to the school. I'm trying to earn money. And now he wants me to teach them English. He's thinking this is too much. How am I going to be able to do this? And they're like, George, no, we're going to pay you. We're going to pay you to teach us English because they're American professor German.
Students.
Yeah, we're going to pay you to teach us German. And this was the way that God provided for him to earn money.
Take notes, translate the books for them, do everything for them.
Yeah, and he was also offered a room to stay in an orphanage for free. And so he was doing that. He was at the school, and then a letter came to that school from a missionary society. And they were asking about a student they could recommend to go and be a missionary in Bucharest. And George was recommended. He filled out the application, and he thought he was meant to go, but it didn't work out. So another opportunity presented itself to go to London, and it was the London Society for Promoting Christianity Among the Jews. So the goal was to just go to that school and then go back to Europe to minister to the Jews. So that's really how George ended up in London in England. So maybe Feston or Isaiah, if you have anything to add on that about him getting to go there or actually ended up going there in his early life in England.
Like when he went to London, he got sick, and then he went to like a small they sent him out to go recover. That's why he met this guy Henry Craig.
Yeah.
That's the guy that invited him, offered him the job to be a pastor at this church with 18 members.
Yeah, it was a small church, mostly of fishermen and their families.
Yeah, so he started preaching, and then he got rebaptized, and then he fell in love with a lady called Mary Groves.
Mm-hmm. She was 8 years older than him, dude. This sounds
8 years
familiar.
older than him.
Yeah.
So she.
Hey, that's
What works.
whatever
Are you
God
trying to
puts
model your life
in front of
after
you.
George Müller?
Hey, almost same
Hey,
birthday.
we're born in the same month, man.
Yeah.
And his wife was 2 years older than my wife, so it's lining up.
Yeah.
But
Not a bad
it
guy.
felt like within 3 months they got married, and then. But the interesting thing in England, first before he went to this church, was that he talked to this society about just like relying on God and not like, because they would support people, but he said, I just want to rely on God. And they said they would not support him. The missionary society said, we're not going to support you, or if you're just going to rely on God, like if you're just going to depend on God providing and living by faith, we're not going to support you on that basis.
Yeah.
Then his friend offered him this position, he fell in love, and then he had like 4 children. 2 of them were stillborns, so he had 2 kids. I think it was here. He said like I started preaching, I think, and then he got transferred to a different church, and then the church had 50 people, and then I think I started preaching, and then the number went down to 20 people.
Yeah.
And then he was like, I thought it was gonna be different. He's like, I thought he was just gonna go. I thought they said preach and they'll come, but it was different from my church. And then I think this is some church that, like the offering. I think they offered him like 50,
Pounds?
50 euros,
Pounds,
50 pounds
yeah.
per, yeah. And he said, I just God will provide. And then at the end of the year, instead of 50, they had 150 pounds. So it was more than he needed. And then there's some stories of that's when he changed the offering. Said there was a carpenter in the church. He said, put the offering box in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, he told his congregation, whatever God puts on your heart, that's what God provides.
Yeah. No
That's
more
all
paying
you
for
get.
pews.
No more paying for pews. So you're not going to rent out a chair at church and just be like, this is my seat.
Yeah.
And then like it talks about at the church, it's like, I needed like I needed shoes, and it was going to cost like 1 shillings. And then he said, well, the box was in the back, and I checked, there was nothing. And then he didn't have the key to check the offering box. And then he called the guy that had the key, and the guy was like, George, there's nothing in here, just 1 shilling. He's like, perfect, that's all I needed. So it's like, but I think from all this, like you learn that like George called them is God will take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Another interesting story that I thought was very powerful was like people asking him like when it was later on when it was at the orphanage just taking care of the kids, and they didn't have money for stuff, and people are like, why don't you just put the stuff on credit? And then it's like, well, God will provide when we need it.
Yeah.
And I think that was something that was powerful because it said when we need it, not when we want it. Like he said, God will provide when we need it in his own time. And it was like, well, you can pray for a day and not have it. You can pray for years and have it. You can pray for a day and have it. And it said, we have a God that provides, that gives us what we need instead of what we want. And by having that faith and having it in him, you learn like when God will provide it. And another interesting story on that of like God provided when they needed it is like
Feston,
that story of
You're-
like the broken.
You're breaking up really bad.
kind of cutting out, and you got all fuzzy.
You're all fuzzy and we can't understand you.
But now,
Oh no. It's like your body is glitching.
can you hear my voice off?
Can't really understand you. You sound like a robot.
My
It's not your accent, no.
You can hear me.
Can hear
Bad
you,
signal.
but
It's just
the
really
signal
like
is bad.
cut up and glitchy.
Yeah.
I think that's why we should just do in person.
Oh, yeah. Come to Virginia.
Or just
I
fly.
got-
No, well, 2 people aren't gonna fly to meet one person.
So one person
That doesn't make
should
sense.
fly to meet 2 people.
Yeah.
That's kind of since the majority rules or majority.
The what?
I don't know what you just said. Oh, I think you said majority rules.
Madrid rules.
Is that what you said?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he did say
Madrid
majority
rules.
rules.
Why would I say that?
Yeah, something's up.
Do you have better Wi-Fi somewhere
Okay.
else?
I don't know.
I think you completely froze now. Whoa.
One side is clear.
You're
How about now?
completely you're completely frozen on
You have a double.
Take the
Taking
campfire
pictures of me.
take the campfire podcast one off. There you go.
What? There's 2 here.
Yeah,
Not-
I'll send you a picture
Not,
later.
not anymore. You just
You're good now. Okay, you were talking about how he would always say that God would provide when we need it, not when we want it.
Yeah, and it ties back to like asking God, like when I was thinking to myself, I'm like, I feel like whenever I need God the most, that's when I'm like fervently praying with faith and like knowing like, wow, I really need to pray right now. Like I need God to show up in a big way right now. And whenever everything is good, I'm just like, you know, I don't need to like bring all my worries to God right now because then I'll major issues. And I'm kind of like doing the economics for God, like, oh God, these are like big issues, which I'll bring to you, but these small things I can just fix by myself. And like from George Müller's stories, like everything you got comes to God, right? Like everything you got big problems, large problems, small problems, you got
Yeah.
Thanksgivings, you just everything, your whole life is just laid to God, like God, I'm dependent on you. And that was kind of like convicting of like, do I like just bring everything I have to God, or am I like, God, oh, this is kind of something you can take care of, but whenever I have something major, I'll just bring it to you so you can take care of that. But and then
I'm gonna pause you really quick, Feston. Are your earbuds your microphone?
yeah, I
Are
think
they
we-
connected to your new device?
Yeah, they should be. Why?
You sound like they're not. For your
I
microphone.
sound like they're not.
For your microphone, it sounds like you're in a big echoey room.
It sounds all right. It does
Does it
sound,
sound-
a
does it
little, it sounds a
sound-
little different, but it's still clear.
It's clear we can understand you, so it's not the end of the world. But
It's not.
No, I don't see the world ending.
Oh. Okay.
he can be a bad judge of the weather sometimes, though. So who never knows?
So can we continue? Or
Yeah, keep
why
going.
are you rolling your eyes?
Keep going.
So I think, like the idea of bringing all your cares before God, for He cares for you, is, and knowing that God knows what's best for you. Because sometimes we feel like, God, I feel like this is I talked about this in the last episode. Like, God, this is my plan. So can you just like make it happen? Instead of like, God, you know better than I do. And you know what I need when I need it. And I trust you. Uh, and I think when you go back to the stories of him, like saying, praying to God is like, we need money, but I'm not going to ask people for money. I'm just going to rely on God. And then he prays for something and the money shows up. Or like, here's another thing that I thought was interesting. Said like, I think it was asking for like, he was praying for a building and it was like, he needed a certain amount of money. And the first thing that came in was like 90 pounds. It was like, okay, God, this is a start.
Yeah.
Right? I'm gonna keep asking you, but this is a good start. And I think for us, and on that point, it was like, he did say, like, he wouldn't start something if he didn't have the full funding. Like, he wouldn't start building a building before he had all the required amount of money to start it. And I don't think everybody's called to that, but I think it's a good way to look at it. Like, God will provide if he wants it to happen. I think that's my takeaway from that point of like, if God wants it to happen, he'll make it happen. And it happens differently for all of us. But for George, he was like, I know God will provide. He's put this on my heart, so he'll provide. And even if 90 pounds comes in today, I'll just keep praying until God provides. Yeah. And another interesting story is when he started traveling, I think he was going to Quebec, and there was so much fog and he was running late for his meeting, and the captain of the ship started praying, and George was like, dude, you don't even believe, so don't pray.
Yeah, George was saying, hey, is there any way we're going to get there in time? I've never missed a meeting in all these years. And the captain was like, it's too foggy. And he's like, okay, let's go down and pray. And he's just prays that God would take away the fog. And then it says the captain was kind of like nervous and started praying. He's like, dear God. And George is like, you know, you don't even need to pray. You don't even believe. So in all my years, God has always answered my prayers. Let's go outside and see if there's no fog. And the captain's like, what?
He did make it to the meeting on time.
Yeah. And the captain became a Christian.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I think from that is praying and believing that God will come through. Mm-hmm. But the danger with that too, I thought, in today's society is that when you pray, we think that if we pray today, then it's supposed to happen in the timeline we want it to happen.
We want like instant gratification. We want it. I'm going to pray, and then 2 seconds later, it's going to happen.
You want that microwave popcorn prayer. You put it in 90 seconds, and things start popping.
Yeah, it's like me. I'm praying that my boys get girlfriends and expecting it to happen this year. You know,
sometimes things take longer, but don't give up.
Sometimes prayers do take longer, but I'm not going to give up.
Here's what George said: if God is in this, then He will provide.
Thank you so much. But I think like it's having faith, having the trust, and believing when you pray. And praying that God knows what's best, and when you need it, He'll provide for you. I think that was my biggest takeaway. Like, you're gonna pray, you can pray all you want, but when you need it, that's when God will show up. Not when you want it to happen. It's like when you need it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think something that along those lines, something that really stood out to me is George Müller. He would say, if God wants this to happen, then He will provide. But it didn't stop there. He would ask, and he would pray, and he would pray, and he would pray. It wasn't just something like, okay, if God wants this to happen, it'll happen, and you're done. But he kept praying, and he kept praying. And George, he was also super specific about the way he used the money that was donated, because at one point he had like, okay, people are giving money so I can buy food for the breakfast outreach that he was doing. He'd make his wife and him make breakfast, and kids and people would come. They'd feed them, and they would read the Bible to them. Then he starts doing Sunday school classes, and people would give money for that. And then he starts doing the orphanage and things like that. But so people would give money to those different things, and George would never pull money from one thing to be used for another. And so I think a story about that is George, he prayed that God would provide 20 pounds so he can go and buy Bibles to give them out. This lady came to his house, knocked on the door, gave him an envelope, and he opened it, and it was 20 pounds. And then he went out, and he's like, hey, like asking her, what were you going to use this for? And she said, well, if you guys don't have any need for it, or just what I was thinking is to buy Bibles and give them away to the poor. So George, he also had this closeness to God to really trust in him and see the specific ways that God was going to provide. And like, it doesn't seem like a big deal. Like if God was going to give money for one purpose and then you use it for the other purpose, like, oh, God gave it. Now maybe he's trusting me to use it. But George was really set on where people gave, and their heart behind it was also going to align with his heart behind that. And I think all of those things, it brought unity to his purpose of what he wanted to do. And his wife and that guy, Henry Craig, the people around him, they were also united in that same attitude as George was.
Yeah. I just want to read from Matthew 6:31 to 34. It says, therefore, do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For after all these things the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. I think a perfect example of this is like that story of George Müller having the kids sit down and the staff is telling him, hey, there's no food. Like, there's no milk. We don't have any milk.
Yeah.
And then it tells like 300 kids, like, sit down, let's pray for the food that God will provide.
You're like, what food?
Right? Yeah, what food? And then there's a knock on the door of like the baker guy that was like, I couldn't sleep at night, so I just had to bake this for you guys. And then a couple minutes later, there's a guy with a broken like milk cart, and he's like, well, the milk is gonna go bad, so here you guys have
for
it
free.
They had fresh loaves of And the interesting thing is I read was that they would buy the food like that was gonna go bad because it was cheaper, but on this day God provided them fresh like loaves of bread and
That's
milk.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing you talked about too is like God using things in a specific, like I've seen it firsthand with the guy that runs the orphanage I grew up at, Pastor Enoch. He's very good at he does all these things that God has called him to, like going to like for outreaches, like missions in like remote places in Malawi. And like those things, we need fuel for the generator, we need like gas for the car, and we need food for everybody. And sometimes it's like, well, I have all these meetings scheduled to go preach to these people, but I don't have the funds for the trip yet. And sometimes like the day of, like he gets an email, someone has donated that money to him. It's like, oh, here's money for the trip, or like, so it's kind of the same thing of George, like God has called me to this, and I'm gonna be a good steward and see it through. And when we need it, God is gonna provide. So that was cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
Oh, thanks.
I'd like to talk about George and the orphanage and really why he started the orphanage. So what was happening is England was going through a rough time financially, and a lot of families weren't able to pay their bills. So the government set up these places called poorhouses, and they're just as bad as they sound. The living conditions were bad. There were a lot of diseases that were spread due to the, what's that called? Hygiene. Yeah, due to bad hygiene. And they had to work.
What's that called when you...
they had to work, just crappy work, like breaking rocks or grinding up things. And kids as young as 7 years old had to work. And so what George saw is these families were also separated where they lived at the poorhouses. So families were kind of being torn apart. And then from disease and even suicide, there were kids that were just left alone. And they're obviously not in a good position where they live physically and for their health, but then there were also just evil people there. So George's motive to start an orphanage spawned from him seeing that. And so he saw a need, and he knew that God would provide everything he needed if God wanted him to do this. So he had a meeting at the church, and he got some interesting responses at the church. At one point, some person asked, like, does God really care about the orphans? Which is crazy because you read in James, and it talks about true religion is taking care of the orphans, taking care of the widows, taking care of people in distress. So he got people like that, right? And then other people were very positive about the idea. And they came up to him and offered him money and said they would help. And you don't need to pay me. I'll work there for you. And so from that meeting, in 7 weeks, since he told the church, God had provided a house for them to rent. He provided the money. He provided the furniture and everything. And so they had their opening day. And George was there. He went and he had the applications to fill out because I think at that point they were only taking girls who were older than 7. That's all they were set up for. So he was there all day.
He said we're going to start with girls because they're easier to take care of.
Yeah. Ask my brother that. There's 4 of them. But no, he was waiting there all day. And the craziest thing is that no one came. And so he went home to his wife, and his daughter, Lydia, at the time was young too. And his wife and daughter were asking, oh, tell us all about it. How many girls? What is it like? And he's sad. He's like, no one was there. No one showed up. Like, we prayed for everything. He said to his wife, Mary, we prayed for everything. Maybe God doesn't want us to do this. And his wife realized something, and she kind of started laughing. And he's like, what are you laughing about? And she said, we prayed for everything except that God would provide the girls to come to the orphanage. And George was like, oh my gosh, how did we miss that? So they prayed that God would provide girls for them to take care of. And within 2 months, there was 26 girls that were there in the house. And so they had that orphanage. It was in a place called Bristol. And George had now moved from that small town with the fishermen and things like that, or the fisherman village, to Bristol, where it's a bustling city where there's the poorhouses and disease and things like that. And the neighbors, they started to complain that the orphans were too loud and too crazy. And George...
Girls for you.
Yeah. And George was wanting to be a good neighbor and a good witness. And he was thinking like, well, if I just stay here and these people are upset, maybe that's a bad witness for God. So he's just wanting to do everything the right way. So there's land that he wants to buy. And so he prays about it, but the price is too high. So he prays that the man who was selling it would drop the price. And eventually he met up with him, and George was talking. He's like, I want to buy the land, but I can only pay this amount. And the guy's like, you know what?
No, I think it was the guy that offered it. I think George went to his house, and then he went to his house, and the people were like, he's at his office. George went to his office, and the guy's like, oh, you already went home. So George went home and prayed, and then the next day, the guy was like, well, I have this land, but I know you want to buy it, because they had already talked. I think he gave him a note like, I want to buy the land, and the guy was like, yeah, well, I have this land. I'm selling for $200 per acre, but you can give me 120.
Yeah, so he dropped the price down, and the reason why is because he couldn't sleep. So he felt like this was the right thing to do, and he couldn't.
There's a lot of people not being able to sleep.
Yeah, he couldn't sleep. So he's like, I'll sell it to you for this, and then I can go get a good night's rest.
And I like what George said after they said, like God knew that we would need this land, and God knew that this man would need this money because the guy was in debt, so he had to pay his debt. And he said God knew we would need the land, and God knew from the beginning that the guy would need the money. So God helped both of us at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. So from the land that he bought, the acres there, it was a nicer part, kind of more out in the country, fresher air. He was able to build multiple houses. I think it was 5 houses that could house up to 2,000 kids spread out. And another funny story is George, he came home to his house, and there was this elderly lady there talking with his wife, and he didn't really know what was going on, but she was just talking to his wife, and she was ready to go. And she had mentioned how when she was going to ride the train or something like that, like she's like, oh, I can't even buy the food. She said something like that. And then she asked George's wife, like, oh, will you get my shawl or my coat? It's the only one I have. And George is thinking, oh, this lady's here and she's in need. She's poor. She can't buy anything on the train, and she only has one coat or shawl. And so he says, hey, like, we don't have much. You know we don't have much, but if you ever need anything, we're here. If you want money to buy food on the train or if you want a new coat. She's like, no, I'm not going to buy it because my stomach is upset and they make greasy food. And she said, this is the only shawl I have, but I only need one. I only wear one at a time. And George is like, okay, like, I'm sorry. So George thought she was poor. A couple months later, she comes back, and she had been given an inheritance of 500 pounds. And she was meeting up with George's wife to see if she wanted to give to them, like a couple months ago. And then she comes back later and she says, you know what, because you were so kind, because you were looking out for me, like I didn't need anyone to look out for me. I'm well off. But I can see you really are that type of person. You're a giving person. So she's like, I'm going to give that to you. And so that was enough to run 3 orphan houses for a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, because George thought a lady was poor. Like, there's kind of some funny stories about just a misconception like that.
In Philippians 4, verse 6, it says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is like George's like daily thing. Like, oh, I have problems today. Oh, let me talk to God. I need this today. Oh, let me talk to God. And it was just like everything he had was just being brought before God.
You imagine
Because he
how
trusted in God, like that God would provide.
how much less stressful life would be if you have like that much faith in God.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you have your heartaches and like your worries, but having the complete faith in God that like, well, if this is what God wants, then it's what He wants.
Yeah, there's that.
Yeah, like at peace.
There's that old hymn called, where it talks about taking it to the Lord in prayer, and it says, "Oh, what needless pain we bear, all because we do not take it to the Lord in prayer."
Can you sing it?
That's for Patreon. That's later, but
You do love singing. I don't know why you don't want to sing now.
yeah, I think for
He
me,
only does it for money.
just have a couple closing
Okay.
things about George and his later life. George, he had a really great life, but like Isaiah said, he did have some tragedies. He had children that were that died at birth, or I think his son, who was 1 at the time, he ended up passing away. So he had tragedies, and in 1870, his wife Mary, they'd been married for 39 years, she passed away. So at that point, George was in his mid-60s. And so George, he thought the best thing to do was to let someone take over his position, kind of, about looking over the orphanage, and let it be a man and a woman who are married. He thought that was the best course of action. So there was a guy named Jim Wright, who he had known for 25 years. And Jim and his wife, they started looking over the orphanages. But Jim, his wife, died. And in that process, Jim, George, and George's daughter, Lydia, who was, I think, almost 40, and the guy, Jim, was in his mid-40s. Like, those three, they became very close because people were dying and the orphans still need to be taken care of. It's a love story, though, because Jim and Lydia fall in love. And they...
Oh.
Yeah, dude.
So his friend became his son-in-law.
His young friend became his son-in-law. And they started taking care of the orphans.
You're smiling big. What's going on?
It gets better. George sees that. George's like,
Oh.
you know what? I'm kind of lonely, too. So he marries the lady named Susanna. First, George went up. Then he went down. Susanna was 21 years younger. George was in his mid-60s, and she was like 45. So we may want to stop with George Müller comparisons here. I don't know. I hope so. I hope you have a long and happy marriage.
If you marry someone 21 years younger,
All right.
they're one right now.
No. I'm saying for Feston, not for me.
No, but
I
for
wasn't
you
born
too.
in September. So it was from all this young energy from Susanna that George started going out and preaching to the world. He had written a book. He had written a book by now, I think. And now, dude, he went on world tours. He went to England. He went to Scotland. He went to Switzerland. And he didn't really need translators because he spoke 6 languages. This guy was
That's
super
so-
smart.
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Was it he went to China, I think, and he
Yeah.
spoke to the Swedish president?
Dude.
Like, it's crazy.
So Feston told a story about him going to North America. He went to Quebec first, and there was fog, and then there wasn't fog because he prayed. He went all over the U.S. He preached over 300 times. Then he went to Egypt. He went to Palestine. He was at the pyramids. He was at the Wailing Wall. He went to Greece. He went to India, Rome, Australia, New Zealand.
This is in his 60s and on.
Yeah, this is in his 60s and 70s and I think 80s because when he was younger, he had health problems. And then I think, like fine wine, as he got older, he was feeling better. So,
Oh.
You're that Feston, there's hope for you yet.
but
What do you mean?
again, George's... Oh, wait, no. Oh, his daughter, Lydia, while him and Susanna were away on their world trip teaching, his daughter Lydia died at 57 years old while George was away. And that was a sad time. I think they're in India. So I don't think Jim got remarried.
Those are your closing thoughts? What
No,
a
no,
way
no.
to end the episode.
No, but right, even into George's late 80s, he's still going, he's still teaching. And then in 1884, Susanna died. So now George, his first wife, second wife, daughter, kids, right? They had passed away. But he still had this energy going all the way up into his early 90s. And then there's a story where at this point, that's when George Müller moved in to one of the orphanages and he lived in a room there. And at multiple times, that guy, Jim Wright, he had said, like, George, we can get someone who can be your assistant who can help you if you ever need help. And George always refused. Like, he was okay. He didn't want to, I don't know, maybe he felt like he was bothering people or he was just good. Until one day he told Jim, he said, you know what? Hey, I tried to get out of bed, but I got really tired. And I just had to take rest breaks in between getting dressed. Kind of like reminded me of my own grandpa. Like, he would get all tired, he'd sit down and do something else, just how old people are. And Jim is like, yeah, we'll get you someone to help you. There's no problem, right? No problem. That's what they say in the Bible. No problem at all. And so
I thought they're in Britain at this point.
yeah,
Why are
but
they speaking of falling?
I've been through there. But
It's all about Reilly. Remember, it all goes back to Reilly.
so
Oh,
George,
okay. I like it.
George just says, tomorrow have someone help me. So George, he went through his normal things that day. I think he led a prayer or a study. Then he went to his room. He read his Bible. He went to bed. And the tomorrow never came. He passed that night. And
I'm very conflicted. This is feeling like a movie where we ended with them, like,
It's not a sad
Why
ending.
we
Riley's
anyway.
closing thoughts are Lydia, his daughter dies.
His life was awesome.
His
but
wife
at the end,
dies.
everyone dies.
Then he dies.
Spoiler. Tomorrow never came.
wow.
But the good news is he was in heaven.
Is that your final thought?
Is that your final thought, or is someone else gonna die?
No.
Does
just
Jim
wait.
die too? Or did Jim still
Eventually, Jim dies. Everyone in this story that we've talked about, even the orphans, they all die.
Wow. I think my closing thoughts is our God in heaven. He does provide, and He knows what we need when we need it. And I think living by prayer and by having faith and trust that God, when we ask Him for things, when we need it, He'll provide. I think that's, like as I said, I think that that makes life less anxious and less worried. You're not worrying about tomorrow because you know that whenever God, when you need it, God will provide, and that prayer works. I think most of the time, like I said for my own self too, is sometimes I bring bigger problems to God, and the small problems I'm like, God, I don't need to tell you this. I can just take care of them, and then it'll be good. But I think it's like George Müller did. It's like you bring everything to God, small, big, and He'll take care of you when you need Him to. I think that's my takeaway from Joy's life is you spend time with God in prayer and reading His Word, and you trust that He is good to take care of you.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing that I want to take away from this is to beware.
People die.
Don't worry. No, it's to be aware of worldly wisdom. Because George, he didn't have worldly wisdom, but he was full of godly wisdom. From the time he spent reading his Bible, he read his Bible, I think, over 200 times throughout the whole thing. He spent so much time in prayer, and a lot of the things that he did doesn't really seem like a wise thing to do. But really what God was doing is He was just bringing George to a spot to where he needed God to provide. And so that's the wisdom that George had. He knew that there was something bigger than what it really looked like, and that God was going to provide his needs. Like during that hard time in England, he would go to people and be like, to the dad, like, hey, are you spending time reading the Bible or praying with your family? And he's like, no, I've been working so much trying to keep my family out of the poorhouse. I don't have time to do that. I just come home and sleep. And he goes, maybe you should work less. That doesn't seem like the right thing to do. But I think in everyone's life, throughout any time period, that worldly wisdom creeps in and can hold you back from what God is really wanting you to do.
Yeah. I'm not trying to have the last word, but I just remembered something. I know you're
I have
going
a-
to
I have a-
Feston trying to have the last word.
I have a question for Isaiah. Should I ask it now?
Yeah, ask it now.
So Isaiah, should Christians ask people for money to support their missions?
I think it's on a person-to-person basis.
Okay.
What do you think, Riley?
That wasn't asking me.
No, I'm asking you now. So
I don't know. Go ahead,
Anyways,
Feston.
I think from George's life is like we read in Matthew's, we seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added to us. But we seek to glorify God in all we do as good stewards, instead of just like, oh, if God lets me, like other people will look at that and be like I've seen people that like at the orphanage I grew up with, people that would support stuff or like give money for like buildings. They'll be like, I want my name on that building. Like if I want my name written across that building. Like I want people to see that I gave money for that. And I think like with George Müller is you're saying, yes, God provides and he takes all the glory, sort of like God gave me this, but if I give it to you, then I do want some publicity and I want you to influence to post me on your socials
Tag me.
and tag me. Yeah. But yeah, those are my closing thoughts. Isaiah, anything before we end this episode?
no, I have
All right.
no more
On
thoughts.
that note, On that note, thank you for tuning in. If you have any comments on George's life, please let us know in the comments. If we said something out of order, we kind of expect that to happen, so please let us know.
Fact check.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone. That helps us out a lot. And thank you very much.
If you have any other cool missionaries that you think we should discuss or talk about, or even books you'd recommend, leave them in the comments.
Yeah, that too. If you want us to go through something, you have a topic that you want, or you have a guest suggestion that we should have on, we're always open to suggestions. I know you don't want to hear Reilly all the time, so let's bring some fresh voices on in here. Okay.
I hit a chord with Reilly.
Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in. Till next time.
All right. Yeah, I guess. Bye.
Bye.